Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a un nuevo episodio del podcast de EntreprenUp, de Keep It Up Show, un espacio creado por dos emprendedores donde invitamos a personas chingonas e increíbles que están cambiando la forma de ver y hacer las cosas. Cada martes, jueves y sábado podrás escuchar un nuevo episodio donde encontrarás información que te ayude a impulsar tus ideas, empresa, pero sobre todo, tus sueños. Antes de empezar, si nos estás escuchando en YouTube, apóyanos con un like, dándole click a la campanita y suscribiéndote al canal. Y en Spotify, dándonos seguir y calificándonos. Hoy te hemos invitado a Gordon Daugherty, cofundador y chairman de Capital Factory. Gordon ha apoyado en diferentes roles como inversionista, como emprendedor, como mentor, como escritor, promotor del ecosistema emprendedor en Texas, a cientos de emprendedores durante décadas. Hablaremos con Gordon sobre la importancia del balance entre pasión y ser una persona terca, cuánto efecto real causan los mentores en los emprendedores y las posibilidades que vienen con llegar a un sector desde fuera. No importa qué te dediques, keep it up.
Somos una agencia creativa de talento latino, que es inquieto, apasionado, inconforme y contagioso. Ansiosos por entender el idioma de las marcas, porque siendo honestos, el idioma del cliente solo lo habla el cliente. La agencia habla su propio idioma, y el consumidor habla el idioma que sabe, que le acomoda, pero sobre todo, el que quiere. Nosotros, las marcas, las agencias, tenemos que crear un lenguaje que nos ayude a comprendernos, que comunique claramente a cada una de las partes para alcanzar juntos los objetivos de negocio, entendimiento y bienestar que cada uno busca. Por eso somos Portuñol, un encuentro de culturas que nace para el entendimiento real entre las marcas y los consumidores. Un lenguaje de comunicación universal que encuentra el ritmo perfecto para que marca, agencia y consumidor hablen claramente. Portuñol, ingenio latino.
Hola a todos, aquí Sebas de EntreprenUp y básicamente quería venir a contarles un poquito sobre lo que hacemos en EntreprenUp cuando no estamos haciendo este podcast que nos encanta. En EntreprenUp somos una empresa que colabora activamente con más de 800 speakers nacionales e internacionales para crear experiencias que trascienden. Entonces, si tienes una compañía, organización o individuos interesados en organizar eventos, workshops, podcasts, creamos nuestra área de Entrepreneur for Business, donde materializamos nuevas formas para conectar con clientes y empleados. Entonces, por favor, si estás interesado, escríbenos a sebastian@entrepreneur.mx o al celular 55 32 22 91 84 y te esperamos para crear grandes cosas juntos. Hola, muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a otro episodio de Keep It Up Show. Aquí Sebastián Aguiluz, cofundador y CEO de EntrepreNUp, y estoy con Gordon Daugherty, que ahorita vamos a presentarlos un poco más. No estoy muy seguro de cómo presentarlo porque es un emprendedor de mucho tiempo exitoso, es cofundador de Capital Factory, es fundador de Shockwave Innovations, es escritor de libros, mentor de startups, inversionista en docenas de ellas. Entonces, por el resto de la entrevista hablaremos en en inglés. Y pues nada, por el resto de la entrevista hablaremos en inglés, entonces perdonen mi inglés, pero pues nada, le voy a dar la bienvenida a Gordon. Hi Gordon, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you for having me.
Really glad to have you here. Gordon, I'm not completely sure, and that's why I was telling in Spanish, how to present you, because you've been everything in the startup ecosystem. You've been an investor, a book writer, a startup mentor, an entrepreneur yourself, an ecosystem builder. So how do we present you?
It's a great question. You know, it is funny. Many people with their career, they find a pathway and they continue on the similar path. I was the opposite of that. I zigged and zagged. I moved left, I moved right, big companies, small companies, marketing, sales, business development, strategy, investor. I think I start to get bored. Once I feel like I have learned a lot about something, I have to go do something new. And so that influenced my 28-year career and also has influenced what I have done after that 28-year career.
So let's start with the beginning. Tell us your secretary and how did you start? How did you fall in love with this startup ecosystem?
Well, I fell in love with technology when I was in high school, when a computer showed up in my math class. This was in the early days of the personal computer. So I knew from that moment that I would do something with computers and technology. So yes, I got a computer science degree. But after I graduated, I went into the business side of things. And in about 2000, I was running a technology company. It was an Israeli-based technology company. And some of the engineers decided to leave to start their own startup, and they realized they needed some help. And so they asked if I would be an advisor to them. And so I did. I helped them write the business plan and get funding. And I learned that I really enjoyed it. One, I learned that I was good at it. I was good at giving advice to someone starting a business. But I think more importantly, I learned that I personally enjoyed it. I could be running a company and also advise a startup that's doing something really innovative and really exciting. And from that moment, I decided that if there was ever a point that I found myself working because I wanted to, not because I had to, that I wanted it to have something to do with helping entrepreneurs build and grow great companies.
In your experience, since you've seen it from basically every angle, what is the it factor that makes, I know we're bringing many different people with many different contexts into the same word, but what is that it factor that differentiates a good entrepreneur or a normal entrepreneur from a great one?
Boy, this is kind of the magic question, but if I had to say only one item, I would say it has to do with having personal passion for the problem they are solving. Entrepreneurship right now is kind of a sexy thing to do. Everybody, not everybody, but so many college students, young business professionals, want to be an entrepreneur. They want to start a startup. They see Shark Tank, they could see themselves doing that. And they might make the mistake of thinking that it's as easy as finding a problem that needs to be solved and going and building a product to solve that problem. And sometimes that works out, but it is so difficult to build a great company. There's just so many things that can kill the company that I find that actually the it factor is when the founder actually really cares about the problem they're solving. They have what we call a fire in their belly. They won't stop. They can't hardly sleep at night because there's this problem that must be solved. Usually that means it's because it's a problem that affected them or affects them today, or a problem that severely affected a family member or someone that they really care about, someone they love. This is oftentimes where that passion comes from. So if I had to only pick one thing, I would say, and one of the it factors is having a personal passion for the problem they're solving, because those founders will be unstoppable.
Now that you mention it, since being an entrepreneur has become sexy, or people think it's sexy when it's a life of upsides down, do you think this has changed the perspective in a bad way about what it really requires to be an entrepreneur? Because there's, like you mentioned, there's the example of Shark Tank, and they only see someone pitching in front of television. They don't see the whole thing. Or with all these movies about and TV series about entrepreneurs, you see the beginning and then it says like 5 years later, and then he's a millionaire, right? And what they don't tell you is that in those 5 minutes, it's not like they had a problem at the beginning and then nothing bad happened for 5 years and then they were a millionaire. It's like those 5 years were full of their own problems. Maybe not as big,
yeah,
or maybe not as sexy for a TV series, but there's still a lot of problems and a lot of work and a lot of decision making that, well, sometimes you make all the right decisions and then a pandemic comes and throws every single thing away. So do you think we're making a bad or a wrong image of what being an entrepreneur is, and that could bring a lot of people who aren't ready or aren't born to be entrepreneurs?
I don't think so, but I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
I see it almost the same as what we think about for career role models. When we're young, we're trying to decide what we want to be when we grow up. And when I say young, maybe that means in junior high, maybe it's while we're in college. We're trying to figure out what we want to do, when we grow up. We might meet a doctor that or a teacher that especially inspires us and becomes a role model. We might see an actor on TV. We might see a professional sports athlete that's what I want to do. I want to be a professional football player. I want to be a famous actor or singer. I want to be a doctor. And this inspires us to go down a path. At the moment that we see the professional athlete or the actor or the doctor, we know it's not easy, but we probably have no idea just how difficult it is to be a professional football player, a professional actor, or a brain surgeon, right? So we go down the path, and along the way, we learn, it starts to get a little bit difficult, and then more difficult, and then more difficult. And at each step along the way, we get to decide, do we want to keep going down this path, or do we want to go in a different direction? And in every case, if we decide to go a different direction, it's not a total loss. It's not a waste of time. If you go down the path of being a professional athlete and you get as far as playing for your university soccer team, for example, you're a pretty good athlete. You have developed some very interesting and relevant skills for other things that you might then go decide to do because you were not good enough to be a professional soccer player. It's the same in entrepreneurship. I could even maybe argue that it's better in entrepreneurship. When you go down the path to build a company, build a product, recruit employees into your venture, figure out how to pay them, how to manage them, how to go get your first customers. Just getting a product in the market and a few paying customers, the amount of knowledge and wisdom that is gained in such a short period of time is unbelievable, even if they decide later that they were not good at it or don't like to do that and they decide to go do something else.
I imagine that this scenario has happened to you a couple of times, if not tell me, but have you ever had an entrepreneur that you are an investor or a mentor or something that you say, this guy or this girl is an amazing entrepreneur? They could be amazing and they have a lot of passion for what they do, but their passion is just in the wrong startup or in the wrong sector or whatever. Like if this one did another thing, they will make a unicorn, just for an example. And they have everything except the focus on the right idea, or their passion is somewhere where the money isn't. As an investor or as a mentor, first, have you had this scenario? And if so, how does it feel? Do you want to advise them, but at the same time, it's not your decision? How do you work with this scenario?
I do see it a lot. A very high percentage of the time, I see what I believe is a strong business plan. 80% of it is it's good, but there's 20% of it that I don't agree with, or I'm really nervous about. But that could be any different 20%. Maybe the market is a great market, but the solution they're building isn't quite right, or maybe it's a great solution but for the wrong market, or whatever, right? There's 10 different aspects of the business plan. All it takes is one or two of them to not be solid, not be exactly right, and the startup is not going to build a great company. So I see it all the time, and what I'm really looking for is the founder coachable are they flexible, or are they just so, I don't know the right word, stubborn, that regardless of the signals they are getting from the market, from the investors, from the advisors, regardless of all that, they just will not adjust and adapt. This is a really difficult dilemma, because I already told you that one of the secret ingredients or it factors is they must be passionate about the problem they're solving. This means they must be extremely confident, but they also need to be coachable. They need to be flexible. So there are ways of solving world problems in a slightly different way than they originally saw it. A minor pivot here or a substantial pivot there, still building a great company that has happy customers, happy employees, and solving an important problem. Yeah, that's what I look for.
Talking about percentage, how much percentage do you think, I know every people is different people, but how much percentage of the entrepreneur do you think someone can help grow or improve with mentorship, courses, etc.? And how much is that it? Is their own, that's the way they are, stubborn or not, there's a limited to their qualities, etc. How much percentage can someone work on them, and how much is enough to make the change that the company and the entrepreneur needs?
It's a really good question. I almost think about it in terms of, we talk about psychology and people's personalities, and we talk about nature versus nurture. The way you, Sebastian, were born, there's certain parts of your personality that it's almost impossible for you to change. It is the way you were born. It's in your DNA. It came from your mother and your father and your grandparents, and there's almost nothing you can do about it, right? But we know that we mature throughout our lives, and that the way we were when we were a child and in high school and in college is not exactly the way we act and the way we operate and the way we think when we're in our 20s and 40s and 80s, right? So we mature and we do adapt and adjust throughout our lives. So nature versus nurture. The way that your parents raised you influences certain aspects of your behavior and the way you think, right? So there's certain ways you think that you were born with, and you can't really change that. There are other ways that you think and act that were influenced by your parents and your grandparents and your friends and others. It's the same way in entrepreneurship. So when I'm looking and evaluating a founder, I'm trying to figure out what strengths and weaknesses do they have that are part of their core nature, versus what skills are they missing that I can teach them. I can teach a founder to be a better salesperson. And a founder is always selling their company. When I say selling, they're selling the vision to an investor to get an investment. They're selling the benefits and value of the product to a customer to gain revenue. They're selling the culture of the company and the opportunity to the employees they want to hire. Most founders do not have sales skills. We can mentor and advise and teach them that. But we're building on their foundation of certain things that we cannot change. If you are a cocky founder that always feels like you are right, you've probably been that way your whole life. You probably argued with your parents when you were 6 years old, and you argued with your boyfriend or girlfriend. You argued with your teacher every time you got a B+. You argued that it should be an A- on the paper. And I can't change that. I cannot advise you and mentor you on those kind of things. I can advise and educate you on a whole bunch of other things that you don't know about for building a great company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Gordon, obviously you have a more complete vision, because not only for the experience, but because you've seen it from every different angle, from entrepreneur to investor to mentor, etc. And that makes a more complete vision. However, has there been times where that the different parts of your brain collide against each other. Like the entrepreneur part of your brain says, okay, we should do A. And the investor part says, no, we should do B. And then how do you, because I understand that you have different roles and that you have to think different, because if we were making a movie, the producer has to think different than the director and then the actors. But obviously, if the producer and director was also an actor, it helps. But how do you keep these different ways of thinking from colliding and blocking each other? Because I don't think it should be easy.
It is not easy. It's something that I do need to constantly remind myself of. What I try to do is first, I have to remember what side of the table I'm sitting on. If I'm an advisor to a company and I'm not the investor, well, then I put the operator hat on. As the founder is asking me questions, I usually don't answer their questions. Actually, they want me to give them the answer. They feel like I've got all this experience and success, and they just, Gordon, tell me the answer. Is it 21 or 27? I know you know the answer. Just tell me, is the answer 21 or 27? But I try to not answer their questions. I answer their questions with my own questions, or I might answer their questions with stories, because I'm trying to help them find the answer. And the other thing is, actually, sometimes the answer can be both 21 and 27. But if it's 21, then this is how we build the company. But if it's 27, this is the way we build the company. And since I'm not building the company, I need the founder to come up with their answer, right? So this is the first thing I have to remember. The other thing that happens when I'm an investor in the company, I sometimes will say, well, look, as an investor, this is what I'm nervous about, or this is the way I'm thinking about this. And then sometimes I might take my investor hat off and put my founder hat on and say, but if I'm thinking about it from your perspective, these are some other things. And so I really will speak with whatever voice I'm trying to represent to the founder. But it is hard. It's a little bit easier for me as an investor. That's because I was an operator for 28 years. So investors that never ran companies, that never created a marketing campaign, never had to go sell a product to a customer, sometimes they have more difficulty understanding and empathizing with what it really is like to run the company. So they only come with the investor's perspective, and they don't have the empathy for the other side of the table.
Let's talk about technology in startups, or of technology in general. It's been a couple of, let's call it, decades now, where it's been a good time to be a tech entrepreneur. VC loves you guys, or basically they only invest, or mostly only invest, in technology companies. At the same time now, I think it's changing a little bit and looking more for profit before speculation about the value of a company. But tell us, since you've been a couple of years now in the industry, how has been the evolution of technology been for someone that's been on the inside? And also, I don't know, is there any evolution that you think will come for the tech ecosystem in the coming years?
You know, the thing about technology, I go back long enough to be able to use the words innovation going back, into the 1980s. So that theme continues, right? It is mostly about innovation, new technologies, opening up new business models, new capabilities, changing the way we go about our lives, changing the way we run businesses and whatnot. So that stays the same. However, I would say that the pace of innovation is much more rapid now. It's now along multiple dimensions, right? If we think back to the late 1990s, the main thing we can point to is the internet. And of course, that was so significant. It unlocked, so many different things. But now you think about, where we're living in this day and age, my God, I could say a different word instead of internet, but I could say 4 or 5 of them. I could talk about the evolution of the internet to Web3 and just what all the blockchain is going to enable. I can talk about artificial intelligence and the 28 different ways that artificial intelligence is going to totally change our lives, including things like walking humanoid robots that will be a part of our everyday life, right? When we can talk about space technology. And I mean, like 20 years ago, it was one thing, I might say. Now it's 5 or 10 different things. And every 2 or 3 years, the 5 or 10 different things are even different. So this just creates an infinite number of opportunities for entrepreneurs, and at a time where it costs almost nothing to start a startup. You and I can sit in a coffee shop, riff on an idea. We've got a napkin with a whole bunch of things. That afternoon, we go make some kind of a legal filing for $200, and you and I have a startup. I mean, 20 years ago, that was not possible. And so we live in a very interesting time in relation to the question you're asking.
Is it difficult for, I know, and I understand, and I share your idea that it's way easier now to start at a company than a couple of decades ago. I ask you, as someone from outside that ecosystem, is it difficult for someone who doesn't have a technology background to get into this ecosystem, to try to make a tech company? Because obviously they don't have to be the best programmer or something, but again, there's some things they just won't understand if they don't have the same exact background.
I don't think so. I mean, I really do believe that coming into entrepreneurship from the business mindset or the mindset of the marketplace versus coming into entrepreneurship from the technology can build equally great companies. The first one is coming in with, here is a problem in the market that needs to be solved. I wonder if I could recruit a team of people to solve that problem, right? The other one comes in with a capability. Wow, I know how to do this. I have figured out, I'm really good at this. I wonder if there's a problem in the world that this could really be an interesting solution for. So when the two of those people meet, now you've got the team. And this is why so many founders will hear the importance of co-founders, of a 2-person team. This is why so many investors will not invest in a solo founder team. It's because we know that we're only investing in half of the equation and the other half is really, really important. It's important to know that the world wants to solve the problem. And it's important to know that a product can be built to solve that problem. Once you have those two, you have the start of a company. I can't guarantee that it'll be a successful company, but at least you have a reasonable start. So I think you can come from either direction. I really do.
Let's talk about, since we're talking about meeting founders and starting from scratch, and you have a Capital Factory, which is making great progress in that area in Austin, which is itself an ecosystem that's growing a lot in recent years. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do in Capital Factory and how it was born?
Yeah, we refer to ourselves as the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas. And we did start with our roots in Austin, more than 10 years ago. But the idea was to build a startup ecosystem underneath one brand name. And this was because Austin was a thriving technology hub. And there were, a good number of interesting startups, but there was not a cohesive ecosystem, like one place that the founders could go to join a community, to get advice and insights from mentors, to get help fundraising, to get education, to get investment, to find their next employees, find their next investor, find their next customers. And so we built that. And we started in Austin, and then we expanded it across Texas. Well, now, in these days, there's lots of co-working spaces. There's lots of venture funds. There's lots of accelerator programs. And so, okay, at the time that we built it, all of those things didn't exist, and they definitely did not exist in one place. So we created this center of gravity in downtown Austin to be that place, an ecosystem for entrepreneurs, and then we expanded across Texas. So that was the objective. We had the benefit of building it in a place like Austin, Texas, that already was a tech hub. And that's a big difference. That's why it's so much harder to recreate a capital factory in some other city around the world that is not already a tech hub. For sure, they can do it, but they won't have some of the advantages that we had when we started Capital Factory.
I can imagine. Let me tell you real quick, because it's funny, because in EntreprenUp we had a kind of similar thing, is that in Mexico we also have venture capitalists, we have accelerators, incubators, everything. And we have a lot of good storytelling ways to call us, but the one thing I prefer is how one of our mentors call us, that is like the weird thing in the middle of the Mexican ecosystem that brings everyone together. And that's how we see us. We see us as the first mile for people who want to start their business or who want to learn about innovation and entrepreneurship and don't have the same money to start, and they don't even know how to start, because that was me a couple of years ago. Like, okay, I want to start a company, and okay, you have to go to an incubator, and then you see like 200 incubators and you don't know which is the good one, which is the bad one, because every single one is telling you we are the good one and the other one don't work, and you just don't have the information. So I really like what you guys do in Capital Factory. I've only read about it. I haven't been to Austin yet, so so I haven't seen it in person. But as a fellow ecosystem builder and as a relative new entrepreneur, I can tell you that it's really easy for a newbie to lose yourself between every single thing, because I think entrepreneurs in general suffer from this. We take for granted several terms and technical things, and we speak with them like they are something that people should know. and then we'll forget that whenever time before we were just the same and we didn't know those words. And and then I think it's important to bring back, like, be the place that you will have loved to have when you were starting. So,
well, and the thing we've tried to do, and I recommend to the other ecosystems, is we try to not dominate everything. So we are the largest in Texas along any of the dimensions you can imagine, but we really try to play well and partner with all of the others in the ecosystem. We're trying to rise the tide because it lifts all of the boats. And so we open our event center. So we host more than 1,000 events at Capital Factory every year. We don't run most of those events. There's other accelerator programs or meetup groups or other things that they run their programs at Capital Factory. So we want to help them. So even if they compete with us in some area, we don't really care about that. It's let's grow the ecosystem. And as the largest player, we feel like that's an important role that we play really across Texas. And I see too many ecosystems where the co-working spaces they're acting too competitive to each other, and the venture capital firms are acting too competitive to each other, and the accelerators are all trying to compete over the same startups. And it just doesn't work very well. They're wasting a lot of time versus, look, let's just come together, let's grow our ecosystem, let's rise the tide, and everybody can win.
Exactly. My mentor has a quote that I love, which translating it will be like, don't be afraid of competition. No, okay, it sounds better in Spanish.
Yeah.
I'll say it in Spanish and then.
Yeah, say it in Spanish.
No le tengas miedo a la competencia, tenle miedo a la incompetencia, which again sounds better in Spanish, but it will be like, I'm not afraid of competition, I'm afraid of incompetence, but since in Spanish it's almost the same word.
Almost the same word, yeah. Okay, I get it. Yeah, that's good. I like it.
Yeah, so I'm friends and ally with every single one of my competitions. And there are events where they tell me, hey, you brought back, you brought together every 3 competitors to talk about this. And I was like, yeah, they should work together and they should know each other. And
exactly.
It works.
It works.
And it also helps us because what I tell people is that when people ask me to recommend entrepreneurs, they know I don't have a conflict of interest. I recommend the accelerator that I think works best for a particular entrepreneur, or I recommend the entrepreneur who I think will be a better fit. Exactly. because I don't have a conflict of interest, and not a single one of them gives me something that they don't. I'm friends from everybody, and they all hate me secretly, but yeah, no. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Austin. So as you mentioned, it was a tech hub before. It has been growing up in the last couple of years. I don't know, but it's been growing a lot. I don't know if it's a university. I don't know if it's because it's affordable. I don't know if it's because you want to be close to Mexico. I don't know, but why is Austin being chosen by big companies as Facebook, Tesla, etc., to move their campuses, and also for a lot of emerging entrepreneurs to start there?
Well, so building on top of being a tech hub since the 1970s and 1980s, there were some software companies in the late 1990s that had big exits. They were acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. Those founders then went and started their next startups. They also became angel investors, and they also became advisors and mentors. And this got the first flywheel going in Austin, the startup scene in the 90s and into the 2000s. And the rate of growth was pretty aggressive, but starting from a smaller base. And so even though many people have only learned about Austin in the last 5 or 6 years, and especially they're seeing it in the news more recently, this trend has been going for about 15 or 20 years, honestly. More recently, what has happened is Texas is a great place to start a business or locate a business. The taxes are very friendly to the businesses. The laws are very friendly to business. So there are some things about Texas that make Texas attractive. Within Austin, since we have been a tech hub for a long time, there always has been a nice talent pool of engineers and the other positions that you need to build a tech company. We do have a major university, with the University of Texas at Austin, with 50,000 students, and they're graduating a lot of engineers and other roles that are desirable. So that has really helped. And over the years, as more tech companies have decided to set up a development center here. So Apple, a long time ago, set up a development center, but they've been growing it and growing it and growing it more aggressively than most of their other development centers. As that has happened, it caused Oracle to relocate their headquarters here and Tesla to locate their headquarters here. So the companies go where it is a business-friendly environment for them to operate, and where they can recruit the talent they need to continue to grow their big company. Small companies love to sell to big companies. So as the big companies come, more startups were coming because they want to sell to the big companies. They want to tap into the availability of venture capital, and they want to tap into all of the startup resources. So it's this combination of things that just kept building on itself. It's really unbelievable.
Gordon, to start wrapping this up, the last question we make everyone is 3 do's and 3 don'ts for entrepreneurs. Basically, 3 things they should do and 3 things they shouldn't do. So I imagine that you've made a lot of 3 do's and 3 don'ts over the years for different entrepreneurs. So can you, what are your 3 do's and 3 don'ts?
Well, my first do would be something that we talked about. That would be follow a passion. Don't just turn over rocks looking for problems that could be solved. Think about what really drives you crazy. Like if you want to get into this, what keeps you awake at night? So do follow a passion. Number 2, recruit. Think very carefully about the co-founders you bring into the business. You basically are married. It's almost like a marriage. What that really means is you have to learn very quickly how to argue, how to debate. You are going to have a lot of arguments. So the co-founders that you bring need to be people that think differently than you, but people that you can find the right way to argue with. I think the third thing to do is in the early days, think about what I call founding principles. What are the values that you're going to use to run your startup? And I call them founding principles instead of core values, because the founding principles are the ones that we start with. So I think things to do is follow passion, think very carefully about your co-founders, and establish some founding principles in the very early days, your core values. Things not to do on the don't list: don't build the product before you know that the market wants it. Go out and do the customer discovery, lots of interviews before you start building the product to make sure you're building the right product. Don't worry so much about dilution that you give up on the best investors. Founders, they go crazy when they get diluted from 50% equity down to 30%, and then from 30% down to 20%. Dilution is not your enemy. So optimize for growth. Find the best investors instead of worrying about dilution. And then the third one is don't be cocky. Cocky founders have all the answers. Be confident, but also be coachable. I like confident yet coachable instead of cocky. So don't build it first. Don't just optimize for dilution, and don't be cocky.
Before we leave, can you tell us really quick about your book for someone who will be interested and where to buy them?
Sure. I've produced so much content. I found that my personal passion is writing down the things that I believe I know in a way that can really help founders. And I've learned that over the years that I'm good at it. So on my blog, Shockwave Innovations, I've got more than 150 articles. I've got an online self-paced curriculum that is free: launching your venture, growing your venture, funding the early stages. And then not too long ago, I wrote a best-selling book called Startup Success, Funding the Early Stages. It's an early stage fundraising book that's available on Amazon and all of the places where you can buy audiobooks, ebooks, and print books online. It's called Startup Success.
Perfect. Gordon, if someone wanted to, ask you for mentorship or get into contact or simply pitch for you as an investor, or invite you to start a new company, how can they find you on social media?
On social media, I'm mostly on Twitter, and my handle is @Gordon Daugherty, GordonDaugherty, Gordon Daugherty. So they can follow me on Twitter. And then the next best place to find me and get time with me is to, visit me at Capital Factory in Austin or Dallas or Houston or San Antonio at one of the various events that we're running. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Gordon, I want to thank you a lot for your time. And as we say on this program, keep it up.
Thank you.
Si te gustó el episodio de hoy, recuerda que puedes escucharnos en Spotify y YouTube, y para más herramientas de estos temas, estamos en Instagram y Facebook como @EntreprenUp. Si quieres seguir a nuestro invitado de hoy, te dejamos en la caja de descripción sus redes sociales y datos de contacto. Gracias por escucharnos y nos vemos en el próximo episodio. Recuerda, keep it up.